Hello students, welcome to PNYC. So today we'll be seeing the fourth chapter of the syllabus, that is environmental management or ecosystem management in other words. So now in this chapter, the five major topics that we are going to study are as follows. That is reviewing what is an ecosystem, then environment and the ecosystem, environmental conservation, environmental management, and your biodiversity hotspots or sacred forest and groves as they are called. So while the reason for me beginning directly with the main topics and not briefing you is because there is a lot of repetition and overlap on a lot of points and notes in this chapter. And let me tell you, it is going to be a very joyous journey because it is not a typical science 2 or a science chapter, I would call it. It is rather, out of the lab or out of the class science for you people, which you will enjoy. And at least up till your stage, you are curious about, viewing gnats, NGC, wild, animal planet, whatnot. I presume that you all like viewing these channels. So here, now it is not only about wildlife or animals as such, but it is environment altogether. So what do you mean by environment? What are the factors that decide it? What are the governing factors which shape the environment? So now I am in the classroom, I'm talking to you people. So this also is an environment, though you don't see trees and herbs and plants and butterflies, floating around. But this is also an environment. But this is completely concrete. Okay, this is made up of abiotic factors. Now, if imagine I would conduct this class outside under a banyan tree according to the Gurukul system. So you would be in the harmony of nature. You would see squirrels, jumping up and down. You would probably see some birds chirping. You will see some creepy crawling around, isn't it? So this is how you would do what and know what is an environment, right? So let us begin with the five major topics of revisiting or reviewing what is an environment. So obviously environment is made up of biotic and abiotic. So now let us begin with how do you revisit or review an ecosystem. Sorry, I forgot the C over here. So it is nothing but an ecosystem review. So there are so many factors in an ecosystem. Let us best understand what do you mean by an ecosystem with this flow diagram. So this flow chart shows you an overall schematic view of what is meant by an environment or an ecosystem. So an ecosystem, as I said, is made up of two factors. They are biotic and abiotic. So let us see one branch at a time. So what do I mean by abiotic factors? So abiotic factors are classically two types, physical and chemical. The biological aspect will be taken care by the biotic factors. So in physical factors, you have typically got the geographical factors like air, sunlight, water, oxygen availability, nitrogen, right? So on and so forth. So these become a part of your abiotic physical factors. Then what are the abiotic chemical factors? They are divided into two types. Okay. So this is sort of your revision for chemistry, organic and inorganic. So inorganic chemical components are your elemental entities or elements basically which are found in nature which build up the blocks which become organic in nature. So we know that ARS is a carbon-based chemistry or a carbon-based life we live. Let us take the simplest example of nucleic acids, that is DNA or RNA. What are they made up of? They are comprised of a sugar, right? A ribose sugar, which is pentose in nature. Then you have a base which will give purine or pyrimidine, and you will have a phosphate group attached to it. So this becomes a nucleotide which we term as DNA or RNA based on the bases that are there and the elements present in them. So most of them I'm saying, mind well, it will contain the first four entities: hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus to a certain extent. Even lipids, phospholipids, are membrane lipids that are present on skin or any other visceral organs. They are phospholipids. So what do lipids comprise of? Or what do proteins comprise of? Proteins have got everything. The only additional entity is your nitrogen. Carbohydrates are exclusively carbon, hydrogen and oxygen, right? So for your understanding, I will just put a small point over here. So carbs will have CHO, right? Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Your proteins will have all of this: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and also one more entity, that is nitrogen. Your nucleic acids, which includes both DNA and RNA, will have, of course, these three, I mean nitrogen, and it will also contain phosphorus. So this is for your understanding and interest to remember. If you wish to, you may remember or forget. So basically, the abiotic chemical components are your inorganic ones and the organic ones. Organic ones form what are known as the biomolecules class. So biomolecules are what? Basically your nucleic acids, DNA, RNA, proteins, lipids, phospholipids, whatnot. So all of these huge molecules which are biological in nature form the basis of your organic chemical component, right? They by themselves are abiotic, right? They don't have life. Anything that has got life in it or the living component to it are termed as biotic factors. Now let us see what are the biotic factors. Biotic factors are further divided into trophies, right? Autotrophs, heterotrophs, right? Autotrophs or autotrophism is when you produce your self-food. You are able to make your own food. Best example is algae and plants which photosynthesize. So they are able to make their own food, right? So they are termed as autotrophs, and the phenomenon is known as autotrophism. So in autotrophism, you have the producers. In producer also you have the primary producers, the secondary producers to a certain extent. All together they are termed into one, consolidated into one blanket term, that is producers. Now these producers are the source of energy in terms of food for the consumers. Now who are the consumers? They become your heterotrophs, which are dependent on somebody else for their food. It is we humans. Do you think we synthesize our own food like plants? From inorganic components, water and carbon dioxide and some sunlight? No, right? We are not able to photosynthesize and make our own food. So we are termed as heterotrophs. We and most other animals present. Almost all of the higher forms of animals are heterotrophic in nature. So in heterotrophs, you have got again two subtypes. You have got animals and you have got decomposers. So animals, the examples are human, cattle, and this list can be endless. You can name the organism and it is almost heterotrophic. Insects, fish, so many. Decomposers are an interesting class which actually regulate and play an important role in the recycling of nutrients in an environment of a given ecosystem. So decomposers usually they are primarily fungi. A lot of decomposition is carried out by fungi in terms of quantity. Okay, the quantitative aspect of decomposition is majorly taken care by these two organisms. One is bacteria and fungi. Now it is very difficult to decompose as what to a maximum extent. It depends on a lot of factors. It depends on what niche the ecosystem we are talking about, what is the biomass of fungi versus the bacteria present. So it is a win-win situation for both of them, and they are almost equally contributed. In certain places you will see that if the conditions are too harsh, the bacteria might take over. In other cases, mostly it is the fungi, which on a quantitative scale decompose a lot of more matter as compared to bacteria. Now, here in animals also you have got animals are heterotrophic, so they become the consumers. That is why I put this linking arrow over here. Now, in animals also you have got three levels of consumerism. So this consumerism is based on the primary, secondary, and tertiary needs. So primary consumers, now with reference to humans, it is rare if you are a vegetarian, right? You will be the sole consumer, right? Because there are plants, you eat plants and you become the consumer. There is nobody who eats you, right? Unless you are being hunted. But we are not nomads, we are not hunted anymore. We are domesticated, we are civilized. So you become the sole and only consumer. Now, how this consumerism happens in animals with reference to autotrophism and heterotrophism, I will explain it to you with the help of an interesting schema. So I hope you have made a note of all this. Just give me some time to prepare them. Now let us see, as I said, what is meant by a food chain. Okay, actually in the environment, a food chain is very rare. Mostly what exists is a food web. But now that is a bit complex and not expected at your stage. So let us see what is meant by a simple food chain. So in the food chain, you have got the primary producers, right, which are plants, grasses in this case. So I have labeled them with A. So A means autotrophs, and wherever you see the H labels, they are all heterotrophs. So grasses, grasshoppers and caterpillars survive on the autotrophs, so they become the primary consumers. I will write 1 degree over here. So your caterpillars, insects are your primary consumers. Now who thrives on this? Frogs, amphibians, other larger insects. So they are also heterotrophic because they depend on caterpillars as their food source. So they become your secondary consumers. Now frogs are eaten by snakes, by other birds of prey, right? Certain birds also do eat frogs, right? So we can show this arrow as well. So now in this case, the bird of prey I have shown here as it as a peacock, or it could be any osprey, eagle, kite, because peacocks are known to prey on snakes and other amphibians and small animals as well. So in this case, your tertiary consumer will be the peacock and also the snake, right? If we start from this point, if we draw a rays from the frog, so if snake eats the frog, it becomes the tertiary consumer. If the peacock directly eats the frog, it becomes your tertiary consumer as well. But now if we see the food chain, if we reach till this stage of snake and then the peacock preys upon the snake, then this becomes your apex predator, right? These animals are known as quaternary consumers or also known as apex predators because they are the ultimate at the pyramid. They are at the top position of the pyramid and there is nobody above them to kill them directly. So after they die, what happens? Their bodies and remains are decomposed. They are what? Saprophytic organisms like fungi, bacteria will decompose them and recycle back the nutrients into the environment, which will be utilized by autotrophs for their survival and growth. So what do the decomposers do? They give back to the soil the rich humus or the fertile soil, as we call it as humus. So it contains all of these entities, obvious ones, and also the life limiting entities like nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur. So this elemental recycle is very important for the grasses to thrive or any producer to survive because they are told to prioritize their nutrition from abiotic factors. How do plants photosynthesize? What do they need? They need sunlight, water vapor, and carbon dioxide. Water vapor or water, you put either of them is almost the same entity. So they need a lot of abiotic components in order for them to be termed as producers, for them to be autotrophs. See, if they were eating food like us, they would not be autotrophs, they would be heterotrophs. They make their own food, they are self-sufficient. If you plant it and give it sunlight, it grows. Do you feed sugar or do you feed salt to it? Forget about the supplementation and fertilizers that we add. That is to enhance the growth or intensify the growth on certain grounds or certain occasions. But otherwise, if you plant doob grass, duruva as we call it, or any other plant, it is very much self-reliant. It can grow by itself. So this is what is meant by a food web. Now, what is meant by environmental conservation is your second point. So why do you need to conserve environment? What is the need? Okay. So in today's time, there is an increasing need for environment conservation and management owing to a lot of problems that we are facing. I'm sure this year in India, all of you have suffered the deadly heat wave, right? With temperatures in Delhi soaring high as 52 degrees Celsius. Even in Maharashtra, the Vidarbha Khandesh region, it has gone as high as 42 to 48 in certain places. Okay, next to, it is absolutely hostile, unfit to live, and the temperatures are beyond imagination. I mean, it's very easy for me to talk over here, standing in front of you, but those who are farmers, those who stay in rural areas, they do not have got, great houses, air conditioners, water coolers. Imagine what they would be facing. Even if you stay in a hutment or a mud house or a hay shadowed house, I understand that they regulate temperature, but not so high. I mean, these temperatures are beyond what the human race has seen for the past so many years. So that is the need to regulate the environment and manage it well. So now let us see what are the factors which affect the environment. So now, as I said, there are two major factors which affect the environmental management or the ecosystem. So the first one is your natural factors which are beyond your control. It is easy to blame the nature for its loss itself. So these are natural causes: floods, earthquakes, avalanches. All of these are a part of the natural disasters or natural factors affecting the environment. We are going to study this in disaster management as well. So then man-made factors or man-made causes, you have got these primary two major things, that is deforestation. Deforestation could be for a number of purposes. It could be for construction, building railways, roads, making residential areas, and mining, and also mining by itself. Even in an area where there is no forest and you decide to mine because there is an ore of an important mineral, you are actually pulling out things from the belly of the earth or the inner mass of the earth, making pollution and problems in terms of both air, sound, water, whatnot. Because many times there are certain toxic chemicals which are poured along with your chemical or metal of interest, and they are simply let out into the water bodies, which leads to leaching of these hazardous metals into the water bodies, thereby intoxicating the aquatic life. Ultimately, it reaches to the humans, which is termed as biomagnification. So the fish will get intoxicated, the larger fish will get intoxicated, the birds will prey on them. If you have fisheries, if you directly eat the fish, you will keep on consuming the fish, or you eat birds which prey on fish, so on and so forth. So those metals get on and on accumulating in your bodies, which is known as biomagnification, or it is also known as bioaccumulation, because you are like the storehouse for that heavy metal, but it is not excreted at an efficient rate. Right? So that is what is meant by factors and how do we manage it. Now let us see the other points. What are the sources of various pollutions in the water bodies, in the soil? What are the effects? How do you curb them? And what are the examples? So now let us see what are the three major components that we talk about in given an ecosystem or an environment. What are its components? What are its sources? The effects and the control measures. So we have three major types over here, okay, that is air, water and soil. Whenever we talk about pollution or environmental management with reference to pollution, it is always that these three are the major attributes that we study. Now why is it so? Air, because of obvious reason, it is the air we breathe, the medium through which we see, right? So it is the first priority and important component. The other two are important for your survival in terms of agriculture, right? Water is required for your own survival. You need water to drink. Also, plants need to be irrigated. The farmlands that are there. And soil, because soil is a supporting medium, it's a substrate on which the plants grow. Although we are talking about hydroponics and aeroponics, it is far from fixed in terms of the scale in which we will have to upscale it or we will have to produce it. So the research efforts are on. Certain countries or labs around the world are very profusely working on it, and it is a very promising thing. But for it to be upscaled to such an extent it can feed nations. Forget about nations, at least your own district or state is also a very far-fetched dream. So now let us see what are the components of the specific attributes, that is air or air pollution. So in air, the component that pollutes it is your carbon dioxide, nitric oxide from vehicles, right? The dust that is thrown into the air due to mining, driving vehicles, right? Building roads, bridges, doing constructions, ash set out from the industry. And this cause a major thing is actually usually is a major concern in workers of that industry. It also is known to cause cancers. Then the source for this is obviously your industrial vehicles. And mind by class, this is a very interesting exercise. You can add as many components as you wish to in these boxes. Then for the effects, the human effects are lung and breathing issues. I told you it causes cancer. There are breathing difficulties when there is more of smog. What is smog? It is smoke and the fog that is present in winters, which is very profound in northern part of India, especially in places like Haryana, Delhi and allied areas. So they have got increased road accidents. Now why is it so? It is because of reduced visibility. Now due to this, you see many bikes that you buy, okay, 2-wheelers or 4-wheelers, even if you buy them in any part of India, usually they have this default function that your headlamps are on. So as and when you put on the power key or the power button key, when you put on your car or whatever if it's bike, the lamps will glow by default. The intensity differ off and on that you can do by yourself, but the headlamps will be on by default. Now this has been done as a control measure to work this, right? That is reduced visibility. What are the control measures? Obviously, you should have a PUC for your vehicles. If you are polluting the environment, you should use whatever appropriate oils, get the servicing done on time, check for the life of the engine or the life directly of your vehicle, scrap it out, sell it out, or stop using it, right? Because it is polluting the environment. Then there are other guidelines given by the government which you should strictly follow. So now this is for one component of air pollution. For water, it could be so many, contaminating drinking water with sewage. Can you imagine what would happen? Better imagine, I don't need to explain. Heavy metal pollution, as I said, during mining, ores that are mined, or even otherwise, the effluents that are let out from the dye and paint industry, they usually contain heavy metals. In these days, you see, there is a lot of ad about antifungal paints. So what are these antifungal paints? They are very profound and very commonly used in the US. In India, it's taking roots recently. But over there, they have been using this for years or ages now. So how do you make the paint antifungal? Like all this paint that you see in the room, if this was a distemper, oil paint, now you have to make it antifungal because fungi are very, very robust organisms. They survive on a variety of nutrients. So what you do is, in order to prevent their growth, you supplement it with a heavy metal. Now what is the heavy metal of choice? The most abundantly found it is lead. So the paints are leaded. Just as if you go and you say, "Bhaiya, mujhe power petrol do." Right? So what is power petrol? So that power 95 that you see, or supplemented petrol, that is leaded. Over there, in that power 95, you will see it is written as leaded. Leaded means what? It is leading somewhere somebody? No, it is actually lead supplemented. Pb is the symbol for it, lumbum, right? So lead metal is added to it. That is why we call it leaded. So paints, petrol, all of them, their pieces, I told you, like sewage pipes getting mixed with water pipes, what will happen? Disastrous. Other chemicals. So what are the sources? They are human-made drainage systems, industry, agriculture. In India, somehow we don't irrigate our crop lands well. The water is just let out. The fields are flooded generally. Now that is a very bad practice because you see we just have 2% of fresh water on Earth, right? And the entire world thrives on it. Imagine now what are we going to do after we run out of rainfall and the glaciers get on melting? That is one important component. What are the effects? Obviously gastrointestinal tract disorders, in certain cases cancer. I told you these heavy metals get bioaccumulated in your body. Right? So, next is your soil pollution. Now, soil pollution, excessive use of NPK. NPK is a very famous combination. It means nitrogen, phosphorus, and kalium or potassium. So, these inorganic components are added to soil to increase the fertility. Okay? So, they come in different ratios 30, 30, 30, 45, 30, 45, whatever. So, depending on what condition or health of your soil is, this ratio is decided. So now what the farmers have done in a green to increase the yield is with every plantations they are just sprinkling this NPK or letting it out very rampantly. Now it is giving them yield, but the moment you stop adding NPK, your fertility and your yield is reduced because the soil cannot sustain the crop that you are planting. So what are the substitutes for it? Using earthworm generated manure, using humus, using cow dung. There is a lot of branding in the market these days, you see, for organic farm cereals and pulses. The prices are like 4 or 5 times higher than what you get otherwise. So on and so forth. But earlier this was a practice. Nobody taught us this. This was all due to influence that we started using NPK and now we are, seeing the benefits as well as the after effects of it, which are very disastrous. So weedicides, again, you want to clear the grasses, you want to have your crop stand down to run on the weeds to grow. Earlier they used to remove it through physical methods by uprooting it. Now you don't have that, so you directly spray to 4D and many other chemicals. They also get saturated in the soil. So what are the sources? Obviously industry and agriculture. And what are the effects, right? What are the effects that are caused to soil pollution? It is reduced fertility, that is infertility of the soil erosion. Okay, so on and so forth. The soil is contaminated. If your sewage water gets flooded in the field water, it is going to cause your harmful coliform bacteria to be irrigated and your crops will imbibe it. Now, this is not a concern in India, where we mostly cook or other overcook veggies, but in foreign lands or foreign countries where you eat salads, right? Imagine coriander or lettuce or spinach or even bell peppers. Bell peppers is simla mirch or dhuri mirch as we call it in Marathi. So over there in salads, in the Mediterranean dishes and also in the US, it is a very common practice to use this as a raw component in salads. So if you have these things raw, which have been irrigated on a sewage water, it is going to lead to GI tract problems. It is again going to lead to a lot of other havocs in terms of dysentery, diarrhea, so on and so forth. So what are the control measures? Ultimately, it is your self-control and self-discipline and the stringent rules that are set by the government. Now, it is practically impossible for the government officials to come and supervise or monitor your fields. There are so many fields in a given village. Do you think the officer will every day come or in a day visit 4 times at least to your field or the other fields? You have to have the self-control and understand that if you, in a grade of reaping the benefit and the yield, if you just go on rampantly spraying and spreading fertilizers and these weedicides at once or twice for the first consecutive 1 or 2 years, not even 2, maximum it is 1 year. 1 year is enough to deteriorate your soil quality and your agricultural need. So after that, you're going to face this issue. Every time you will have to go and buy NPK because the intrinsic ability of the soil to recycle the components is lost. Everything has got a microflora. You never know your weedicides, though they are weedicides, are not going to affect your bacteria, but with so much of chemical load, obviously your decomposers are also going to be affected, which are your bacteria and fungi. They will also be dead, they will stop recycling the components, ultimately affecting the food chain. So whenever you don't have decomposers, it is going to raise havoc. Imagine if there were no vultures, if there were no crows in cities. Many times we see there is a dead mice on the road or there are certain dead animals like cats and dogs on highways, right? Either they are just rolled and passively swept by the passing cars, or then you have these scavengers like crows, vultures, certain other animals which feed on the dead carcasses or remains. Imagine if these weren't there, if there were no bacteria, fungi which degrade. Imagine would you be able to stay? Just imagine the stink and the filthy condition that would be there around. There would be so many pathogenic bacteria surviving on it, ultimately being a health hazard for you. So every component of the ecosystem is important and these are the major sources of pollution and the control measures that are being given. So this is given as a partial chapter in textbook. I have tried and completed it. As I said, you can add as many components as you want to any box depending on what context you are studying. So after this, we are going to see certain control measures and movement acts that the government had undertaken in order to, or rather has undertaken in order to effectively manage the environment. So I hope you have made a note of these.